Here we are on the second part of the practice test for Chapter 2 test. We're into the graphing now on question 15. If we want to graph this, we're going to put a 0 here and a -6 is someplace down here. If we are going to be x is greater than, so that would be opening that way and going to the right. In interval notation, that would look like from -6 to infinity. For number 16, we know on here we have a 4, we have a 9, and we know that x is less than 9, so we're going to have a parenthesis going that way, and x, remember when we read it backwards going to the left, x is greater than or equal to 4. So a bracket because of the equal sign. It's an and statement, so it's what's between those. Number 17. This one's written backwards, so I want to rewrite it as x is greater than -3. So I'm going to put a -3 on here and a 0 on here. Greater than would be a parenthesis and an arrow to the right. In interval notation, we would use -3 to infinity. For number 18, we have a 17 on here, and we know that 17 is to the right of 0 on a number line. So I'm going to put a bracket at 17 and an arrow to the left because it's less than. On this number line, I'm going to put a -4 and a 2. Somewhere between there is going to be a 0. And we know that x is less than 2. X is greater than -4. We know that it's an and statement because it's written as a compound inequality. And this stuff up here is just a different notation that we don't need to learn for a while. For number 20, we're going to do some solving first. So I'm going to subtract 6z from both sides. And I get z minus 1 is greater than 12 plus the 1 on both sides, and I get z is greater than 12. On a number line, here's my 0, here's my 12. We know that it's a parenthesis and an arrow to the left. In interval notation, that would look like 12 to infinity. For 21, we're going to divide both sides by 3/4, divide by 3/4. Don't worry about dividing or switching the sign because we're dividing by a positive. I get x is less than or equal to -16. On my number line, here's 0, here's -16. We know x is less than or equal to 16, so it would be a bracket and an arrow to the left. On interval notation, since it's the arrow to the left, we're going to negative infinity up to 16 inclusive. For 22, to solve this thing, we're going to multiply both sides by -1. Gives me x and 8. Because it's a negative that we're multiplying by, we have to switch the sign. And here's my 0, here's my 8. It's greater than 8, so it's an arrow to the right. For 23, we have an and statement. Here's a 5, here's the 15. X is less than 15. Going that way. X is greater than or equal to 5, going that way. Since it's an and statement, it's what's between them. So in interval notation, we would say from 5 to 15, inclusive on the 5, non-inclusive on the 15. On this one, it's an or statement. Here's a -3. X is less than or equal to -3, so it's a bracket going to the left. Here's my 3. X is greater than, so it's a parenthesis going that way. Since it's an or statement, it only has to be true of one, so I'm going to say from negative infinity to -3 is true. Union 3 to infinity is true. On this one, since it's a compound inequality, I'm going to solve it by subtracting 5 from all three parts, and then dividing by 2 on all three parts, which gives me a -1 is less than x is less than or equal to 6. We know it's an and statement because it's written as a compound inequality. And we know that x is less than or equal to 6, so bracket going that way. X is greater than -1. Remember, we read it backwards when we read it back. Read the sign backwards. And so in interval notation, we're going to have from -1 non-inclusive to 6 inclusive. And the last one on our review, we're going to subtract 3x from both sides, giving me 2x minus 6 is less than 8. If I add 6 to both sides, I get 2x is less than 14, so x is less than 7. On the other one, I'm going to divide both sides by -3. When you divide by a negative, you have to switch the sign. So I have my two inequalities. It's an OR statement, so I'm going to try to graph that. I know that 5 is here, 7 is over here. Make sure you get them in the right order. X is greater than or equal to 5, going that way. X is less than or equal to less than 7, going that way. We know since it's an OR statement, we know that our answer is going to be all real numbers. Have a good day.